Hello, and welcome to the next to last chapter of the course that we're going to be covering this semester, and that's leadership. And if you remember the acronym that we created at the beginning of the semester, POLK, which was planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. Of course, this is the L in the acronym, leadership and leading. So I want to review what aspects of leadership are necessary in a good manager. If you take a look at the learning outcomes before we start. And we'll cover most of these outcomes, if not all of them. So let's take a look at leaders versus managers. The first thing that I want to say is, and if we were in class, I would ask this question. I would ask you, are all managers leaders? And are all leaders managers? I would ask that question, and most of you would say no to each of those questions, because we know for a fact many of you may have managers that are not very good leaders. And you may know people, you may be one yourself, who are really good leaders and are not in the role of manager. So let's take a look at the different characteristics of a leader versus a manager. Leaders are ones that focus on the overall objectives and goals. I hate to use this analogy because it's so chauvinistic, but football players, if you've ever played on a football team, which I haven't, but I watch a lot of football. I'm not an expert, but I watch it on TV. Most of the time, the quarterback is the leader of the team. They have a mission, they have a goal for each play. On defense, it's usually the captain of the defense or the middle linebacker that takes charge. They're the leaders of that unit, and they focus on their strategies and their missions. Leaders also encourage creativity and risk-taking. In other words, they want to get the job done, and they want to make sure that they can create ways to do a good job. They have a long-term perspective, and they're concerned with the ends. Let's take a look at managers. Managers focus on productivity and efficiency, and they have to do this because that's part of their job. Remember, their job is to get the work done using the company's resources effectively and efficiently. They're preservers of status quo. Sometimes managers just want to keep things as they are if they're working well. They have more of a short-term perspective. Usually they have some type of stated objective, like increase sales by 10%, and that's all they concentrate on. And they're concerned with the means rather than the ends. Now, if you take a look at both of these qualities, leaders and managers, I do want to say that even though not all managers are good leaders, some managers are great leaders, and some leaders are great managers. So even though they don't have to be one or the other, they can be both. And obviously for an organization, it is the goal to choose a leader, to choose a manager that is a good leader. And that would be the ultimate situation where you have someone in charge that not only knows how to manage, but they know how to lead, and they gain and earn the respect of their subordinates and the people that they manage. There's different traits or different theories in leadership, and one is the trait theory. And basically the trait theory simply states that there's a set of characteristics that people have innately. In other words, they just have these traits. And because they have these traits, they make good leaders. And so the difference between a leader and a non-leader in regards to traits, or these leaders or these people have a drive, They possess an inward energy and a desire to lead. It's not something that you learn. It's just something that's there. They have honesty and integrity. They act they have a moral compass, and they act ethically in all the decisions that they make. So if you had someone who had a desire to lead, but would do anything to win at all cost, in other words, would cheat, they're not really a good leader. That honesty and integrity is an important element in leadership. They have self-confidence, but they're not arrogant. In other words, they're not cocky, but they have self-confidence. They believe in themselves. They believe that they can get the job done. They have emotional stability. So if you took a look at their emotions on a continuum, they're sort of right in the middle. They don't get too worked up in any direction. They don't get too mad. They don't get too down. They don't get too crazy. And so when you see people on, and I hate to use a sports analogy again, but if you see people on the basketball court or on the football field who just absolutely lose their minds, and I'm speaking of coaches, well, that's not a really good leadership quality to have. And because some would say that emotional stability is not, they don't actually grade too well when you're taking a look at emotional stability. So I guess I'll use Dana Holgerson, who is the ex-football coach of West Virginia University, and now he's down in Houston, Texas, at the University of Houston. If you watch WVU football and watch Dana Holgerson, he has a tendency to actually go crazy on the sidelines after a bad call or a bad play. I'm not saying he's not a good leader, but that's not a good leadership quality. And it's not looked upon. In fact, in a lot of cases, he's made fun of because of the way that he acts on the sidelines. And some would say his emotional stability is questionable. He's a good coach, and he has experience, but that emotional stability element he could really work on that. Leaders have cognitive ability and knowledge of the business, so that they're able to think. They're smart. They have common sense. They have business sense. So if you took someone that had a drive and a desire to lead people, they were honest, they had good self-confidence, they had emotional stability, they were smart, they knew the business inside and out, they're great leaders. Now, some of those elements that I just mentioned are not evident in some managers. Some managers will actually manage people who have those elements. I've been on teams where I'd say, well, either I or someone else would have made a better manager than the manager that actually was the manager. And in some cases, the manager does have those elements. And again, that's the ultimate situation, is to have a manager who is a leader. But the leadership traits theory says people who have these traits are and should be good leaders. So what are some leadership behaviors? Well, leaders will initiate structure. Okay, they will help set goals and give directions. They'll set deadlines. They'll assign tasks to people. And all of that affects the job performance of the people that are involved. Okay, so a manager with these leadership abilities will be successful, and the team will be successful. Some managers are very vague on the goals that they give, or maybe they don't give any directions, or there's no deadlines on anything. It would be obvious then that manager does not have they don't have very good leadership skills. Consideration is the extent to which a leader is friendly, approachable, gets along with others, supportive, shows concern for the subordinates or the employees. Okay? That genuine consideration that someone has, that affects job satisfaction very much, because if you work for a manager who doesn't show support, who's not friendly to you, shows no concern about you or your family, you're probably not going to really like that person as much as you should, and you're probably not going to like your job as much as you should. So initiating structure and consideration are very important elements for leadership behaviors, because they help set the groundwork not only for job satisfaction but for the success of the organization. There's a leadership grid that has been developed, and if you take a look at this grid, on the vertical axis we're looking at the concern for people. So does the manager or does the person have concern for people? And it goes from a scale of 1 to 9 and from low to high. And on the horizontal axis you have concern for production. In other words, getting things done. So I'm only going to take a look at a couple of these, but I do want you to, it's common sense, but I do want you to have a good feeling for these and a good understanding. A manager who has high concern for production, but very low concern for the people that work for him or her, that's called an authority compliance grid. So they're really only interested in getting the work done and making sure that there's productivity. They don't really look at the human side or the employee side. Most people would not want to work for someone like this. Okay, most people would be very dissatisfied with their jobs and their manager if they were in this 9-1 quadrant or section. I'll give you an example of where you might find that, though. You might find that in the military, because in the military it's an absolute necessity that something get done, or the battalion move from one direction to the other. You're going to be saving lives, defeating the enemy. That's going to require a very strict authority compliance type of leadership. Now, I'm not saying that military leaders don't care about their people. They really do, but they have to get the job done. And they're not worried about hurting someone's feelings or making someone feel good. They want to save lives and make sure that the job gets done. Let's look at the opposite, the 1-9 plot, where we have a very high concern for people, but not so much a very high concern for production. And that would be country club management, okay, where the manager's really is concerned about the people. And the work is almost secondary. The production and the goal setting, that's all sort of secondary. It's the people that come first. And if you watch the show The Office, I would probably put Michael Scott actually in this section of country club management. Michael Scott is always worried about what his people think about him. He wants them to like him. He does everything to, although he does it in peculiar ways, if you're actually familiar with the show, one of my favorite shows of all time. But he's a country club manager. How the business even stayed in business with him at the helm is something I'll always wonder about. But you would classify him as a country club management. Now, someone who has a high concern for people and a high concern for production, that would be more in the team management phase. These people are really interested in everybody being satisfied, everybody being happy. They also want things to work. They want production. They want the company to be successful. So you can see where This makes a lot of sense if you think about it, and you can pretty much classify, if you're a manager, you can probably classify yourself in one of these areas. But if you work for someone, you can probably figure out where they lie on these continuums. So the Blake Moulton leadership grid is something that you probably have heard of, especially the country club management, team management, middle of the road manager. You've probably heard of these terms before. And if not, you will. But it's good to understand them because as you become a manager, it's important to know where you are and based on the situation. At this point, I would like for you to go, well, you should already be in YouTube, but inside my YouTube channel, there's playlist. And one of the playlists is a leadership playlist. And there's a video. I think this may actually be currently the only video in this playlist. But there's a video that was made. It's a mic up NFL mic up video with Kirk Cousins when Kirk played for the Washington Redskins. I want you to watch that video and observe how Kirk Cousins displays his leadership skills, not only on the field but off the field. And if you watch Kirk, think about where he might fall in this leadership grid. It's a very good video. It's actually a very uplifting video. It's one of my favorite videos on YouTube. But take a look at that and see how Kirk displays his leadership and his management abilities on the field. So I hope you enjoyed that video. Like I said, it's one of my favorite videos, especially one of the best ones I've found on leadership on YouTube. The next theory we're going to review is Fiedler's contingency theory. And basically what Fiedler was saying was that we can maximize the team's performance. We can maximize the organization's performance if we actually match the situation to fit the manager's leadership style. So in the Army, and again going back to the military example, in the Army you'll see sergeants, drill sergeants, who have a very stern, authoritarian leadership style. And that type of style is needed in those situations on the battlefield. And so I think that's the best example. You wouldn't want to put someone on the battlefield in charge of a battalion of soldiers who couldn't yell, didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and was not that authoritarian type, didn't have that authoritarian type of style. Okay? So the assumptions that the contingency theory has is leaders are effective when their work groups perform well. And leaders are not able to actually change their style. In other words, it's the only style they know, and they're not very well at adapting. And of course, we know that this is probably not the case, but Fiedler said that for his theory to actually be valid, that leaders are unable to change their leadership style. And that could be true for some people. However, some managers recognize when they need to change their style a little bit towards the situation. Situational favorableness is basically depending on the degree at which the leader has influence on the group's behavior. Okay, so again, just read it verbatim. Depends on the degree to which the situation permits the leader to influence the behavior of group members. So let me give you a really good example. And I think I've said this in class before. I'm a big Bob Huggins fan, who's the West Virginia basketball coach. However, I would say that his on-court leadership style sometimes does not match the situation at hand. In other words, the players sometimes don't respond well to his very boisterous demands and yelling and screaming. Some may say his emotional stability is sometimes questionable, and I don't question his ability as a coach. He may be one of the best basketball coaches of all time. However, I would say that sometimes in the situation that is put forth, he does not exhibit a leadership style that influences the group's behavior. And I think that's obvious and evident. And I would argue that point even to him, although I don't think he's the type of person that would listen or care what my opinion was. But in some situations, that leadership style just does not work well. And basically, as we move on into the 21st century, most people do not respond well to that autocratic type of yelling and screaming. Now, again, on the battlefield, when it's do or die, you have to trust the leader or the manager or the sergeant to make the best decisions. So if he yells at you, you do what you got to do because you don't want to die. However, that's not the case on the basketball court or in the workplace. So, in summary for Fiedler, Fiedler felt that in order to get the most performance, the most effectiveness and efficiency from a group, you need to put a leader whose style matches the situation and how well they're going to respond to that leader. So you're trying to actually matching the leadership style of the manager to the situation that you're putting them in. And then that's going to give the best results, the maximum type of results that you'd want. Sometimes leadership styles are looked upon and determined by the types of decision styles that the person exhibits. In other words, when they're making decisions, how do they or who do they get involved? If you take a look at this continuum here, where to the left, the leader solves the problem or makes the decision solely by themselves, they would be more of that A1. Whereas someone who is willing to accept any decision that's the best decision and supported by the entire group of people that they're managing would be in the G2 section, where they actually share the problem with the employees as a group. And then, of course, there's places in between those two styles. Today, you're going to find most people leaning towards the right, where leaders involve the team, especially if we talked about this earlier in the semester, having a diverse workforce and the importance of having a diversity of talents. So it would be really, success would be predicated on the manager's or the leader's ability to involve everyone in the decision-making process. So in summary for this chapter, here's the main points that I wanted to get across. Not all managers are leaders. Not all leaders are managers. And the trait theory has a lot of validity. If you took a look at any person and interviewed them, asked them questions, you can quickly determine whether or not they would be a good leader. I will also say that leadership style can be learned to some extent, but some people don't want to be leaders. They don't have the leadership qualities. They don't desire to be a leader. They don't have that innate drive within them to lead, and that's okay. Not everyone's a leader. But as managers, you'll be able to tell from just simple questions whether or not someone has that ability. And it's important when you start leading teams that there are members on the team that actually have leadership ability, and that would be desirable. So keep that in mind. But the trait theory is very valid, and that the manager or leaders do have these certain traits that they have that make them good leaders. I hope that you enjoyed the video with Kirk Cousins and seeing how personable he is, how encouraging he is, and even when something doesn't happen right, he's still positive. I think he has a lot of good leadership qualities. On the decision style process, how do people make decisions, and what do good leaders do? Today we would know that they share in the decision with their subordinates because of the diversity of talent that there is. The contingency theory, saying that we put managers in a position that matches their leadership style, and that would be critical for success. And it's very true, because if you take a look at the situation at hand, it's going to involve and require some certain characteristics from a manager in order to lead it effectively. And so as you become a seasoned veteran in business or whatever industry you're in, one of the key factors for your own development is being able to look at someone and tell where they are going to be the most successful. And that's important as a manager, putting people in the right position so that they can grow, and so that they can be successful, and in turn you can be successful. The quiz on this chapter will be combined with the final chapter, which is the control chapter. I believe is chapter 17, but I could be wrong. No, it isn't 17. It's 16. So chapter 14 and 16, the quiz will be a combined quiz. Okay, it will only be 10 questions, but I'm just going to combine those two for simplicity reasons. Again, if you have any questions, any concerns, or you just want to bring up a topic, please don't hesitate to contact me, email me, message me. And I hope everything is going well with you and your family, and you're safe and healthy and getting through your courses successfully. Take care, and I will talk to you in the next chapter before we wrap everything up for this semester. Take care.